This is part 5 of Unit 13. Again, we're talking about World War II, and we're focusing in on the war in the Pacific. In this section, we're going to talk about one pretty specific topic, and that's going to be the atomic bomb. Now, the atomic bomb plays a big role in the Pacific, and that starts with something called the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project is the code name for the secret plan to develop an atomic bomb. That's what its code name is. That's what it's called. And this is a very closely guarded secret of the war. Basically, the story starts with Albert Einstein, who wrote a letter to FDR urging America to research about atomic weapons, because he had learned that Germany was researching, and he wanted us to develop them before Germany. And after reading that letter and conversing with people, FDR authorized the Manhattan Project, which was called the Manhattan Project because it started in New York City, which of course is in Manhattan, and it moved around the country as it developed. At one point it was in Chicago being developed under a football stadium, and then in the final stages it was moved out west into the deserts of New Mexico, where it was finalized and tested and put into production. So that's the little story about the Manhattan Project. What that takes us to is the decision to drop the atomic bomb, and we did a lot in class kind of trying to talk about why this decision was made and so forth. Some things to keep in mind. First and foremost, it's Truman that makes this decision. FDR dies of natural causes, and this is towards the end of the war in 1945. About 30 or so days or so later, Truman, who was a relatively unknown at the time, he's vice president, but he's not known by the American people, has to make this decision as to whether he should use this nuclear weapons or not. He's at a conference with Stalin and Churchill, the big three, at a place called Potsdam, where they're a lot like Yalta. They're trying to decide what's going to happen to Japan, how are we going to finish the war, and what happens to them at the end of the war. They're having a conference about this. Why he's at this conference, that's where he gets the news that the Manhattan Project has been successful, that we have actually 2 bombs that are in working order. You can use them whenever you wish. So from that point on, he has to decide if this should be used on Japan or not. Now, like I said, we did a lot in class, but some things to keep in mind. What he says is the ultimate reason he decides to use it is he's going to save lives, in particular American soldiers' lives. It is estimated that the casualties from invading the homeland of Japan would be extremely high, in the hundreds of thousands at the very least. The fighting in Japan has told them that the fighting is going to be very intense, very bloody, and as we've gotten closer again, remember, to Japan, the fighting has gotten even worse, and they have become even tougher defenders of their land that they own. He also knows through intelligent reports that the Japanese army is substantial in Japan. The number of soldiers defending the homeland is pretty high, perhaps as high as 1 million. He also knows that the Japanese have been training their civilians to fight and repel an invasion as well. So you don't have to just fight the enemy soldiers, you also have to fight the men, women, and even the kids that were being taught how to repel these invaders. What can you do to get rid of the enemy in our home soil? So he's pretty sure that the fighting is going to be intense. It's going to cost lives, and he wants to save lives, especially American lives. The fighting in the Pacific has been really, really brutal and difficult. And with the war in Europe being over, Americans are, really anxious to have the whole war over in the Pacific as well, and get back to normal and get their loved ones home. So he's thinking about bringing a quick end to the war without having to invade Japan, which will save lots of American lives, of course lives of Japanese people as well. But there are other things that he is considering. You probably know that Russia and the United States are not the best of friends. They're communist and we are not, and that means we are kind of enemies. We're friends now, or allies now, because we have a common foe in Germany. We did not like them, we both didn't, so we put our differences aside to fight that. But Truman has to think about life after World War II, and we do not like the Russians. We do not want communism to grow or spread. It's opposite kind of American ideas and values. And so perhaps he's thinking about dropping the bomb to demonstrate to Russia, we have this powerful weapon, you better watch your step. You don't have this. If you do something that angers us, we could use this. So he's kind of using it as a negotiating chip or tool to get Russia or Stalin to do what he wants. He also perhaps wants to end the war quickly, not only to save lives, but to keep Russia from being able to fight in the war and then having a say in the peace process. If we can get the war over before Russia joins the fight, then they don't get a say in the dictating of terms and maybe a chance to grab more land. So that's weighing on Truman's mind. He also perhaps is thinking about, we need to show exactly or even find out exactly what the nuclear bomb can do and will do if used as kind of a demonstration to the world, so that we know what this weapon is capable of, and we can study it, and we know how terrible it is. So these are some of the things that he is keeping in mind. There's also pleas from the scientists themselves, many of the scientists who helped develop the bomb, saying this is not a very good weapon to use morally. It's going to kill hundreds of thousands of people. It's too destructive. It's too horrible. Don't use it. So he has lots of things rattling around in there, and he ultimately says the decision fell to me. And again, what he constantly and consistently pretty much says is, I used it to end the war quickly. Some of his military advisors are saying you need to. Some are saying, you know, Mr. President, if you just wait a while, Japan's going to give up anyway. They're on the near virtual collapse. They're about to give in, and if we just keep bombing them like we are with the regular bombs, we don't have to go to this drastic measure. So there are lots of things for him to consider, but ultimately he decides to use it, and he uses it on the Japanese city of Hiroshima, or Hiroshima, however you want to say it. And the weapon is dropped by the plane known as the Enola Gay, and it is devastating. It is even more powerful than people predicted, and the statistics, depending on where you look, are going to vary, but roughly 100,000 people are killed instantly. That's how powerful it is. The city is basically leveled. It's pretty much totally destroyed, and 100,000 people roughly are killed within an instant, and then many, many more die later from their injuries and effects of radiation and so forth. As far as how many that is, that gets really, really debatable, and it's hard to figure out exactly, but we're talking probably over 200,000 people die ultimately as a result of this. The results are just really, really horrific. And again, these are mainly civilians' death. These are moms and dads and kids and grandmas and grandpas. There are some military targets in Hiroshima, but those are small. So most of these people we're talking about are innocent people who are not soldiers. Before we did this, Truman did give what's called the Potsdam Declaration. That's the meeting again that he was at, where he tells Japan, you better surrender or else, because he indicates that we have this new powerful weapon that has really great destructive capabilities, so you should surrender. We also dropped some leaflets on the islands of Japan encouraging people to surrender, warning of the impending attack, but we did not hear anything from the Japanese, and so ultimately he bombs Hiroshima. After about, I think it's 2, maybe 3 days, still not hearing any rumblings of surrender from the island of Japan. So the decision is made to drop the second bomb then on the city of Nagasaki. And instantly, again, another 60 to 80,000 people die, again, mostly civilians. So the total between the two cities, probably, you know, in the hundreds of thousands at least, people died from the dropping of the atomic bomb. The key thing to remember, though, is these people are innocent people. They're civilians, and that's why a lot of people say that this is a war crime again, that America should be punished for this, that this is something that is morally reprehensible. How could you kill 200,000 more innocent moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas, and so forth? children. This is something that never should have happened, and America should be punished, especially Harry Truman. That's debatable, depends on the point of view. Again, if you're from America, you're saying, hey, they got what they deserve. They should have never attacked Pearl Harbor. They themselves did horrible things. I gave you a kind of a reading in class for that. War is just war, and lots of people die. It's just part of it. And of course, if you're from Japan, you have the different perspective, and then there's people in the middle. So this is one of those controversial things of history. You could go either or on, depending on your point of view. But what we do know is after the second bombing of Japan, we have the Japanese surrender, and then a couple of weeks later they officially signed the documents surrendering on the battleship Missouri in Tokyo Bay, and that is VJ Day, Victory over Japan. And you can see that happens in September 2nd of 1945. And if you remember, the war starts on September 1st, 1939, so the war lasts 6 years. The United States is not in it for all 6, but the war officially comes to that, and there's much celebration and rejoicing around the world because of that. And that's going to end part 5 here, dealing with the atomic bomb.